Hi, I'm Heather Nicol, and I'm the lead for the Arctic Regional Study for the Big Borders and Globalization project. So I've been asked to talk about what I've learned from our study on the Arctic. We've learned a lot, and that's partly because we didn't know much to start with about Arctic borders. We knew that Canadians and many people in North America, and indeed the world, were worried about maritime borders and were worried about sovereignty and exerting sovereignty and staking claims to northern borders and the North Pole and the resources and climate change and transit shipping, but we didn't really know much about what that actually meant for borders and cross-border relationships or for the people that lived in the Arctic. What we've learned is fascinating. We've learned that there's not much known about the way in which land borders play a role, in which they separate communities. In the Arctic, which is 50% Indigenous in Canada, highly Indigenous in Alaska, and predominantly Indigenous in places like Greenland, they're separated by national borders. And this creates huge problems for Indigenous peoples. It also creates problems when the borders aren't well understood. What should be managed? What are the real security threats? How should they be approached? We often borrow our border management models from the South, particularly in Canada, from how we manage the border with the US along the 49th parallel. And in many cases, these kinds of models don't work. We may not be looking for terrorists. We might be looking more to figure out how to facilitate sort of the transport of large shipload or truckloads of commodities coming from mines in the Yukon through down the highways down to ports in Alaska, because there's no other effective way to get them to market. We might be interested in the way in which hunting territories for people like the Gwich'in in northern Yukon, in the old Crow area, actually cross borders or boundaries into the US, these traditional territories. And now people can't hunt on both sides of the border anymore. What does that mean for them? So there's all kinds of things that we don't know, and we're just learning are important. It's not just sovereignty and security, although that is important, and how are we going to cope with new levels of transits and ships of all stripes and colors and kinds coming into the Northwest Passage, if that indeed happens. But what does all of this mean for people in the North? And how are borders going to be used effectively to manage some of these problems?